All right, joining me now here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is Robert Naiman. Robert has written for Truth Out for the Huffington Post. He is the policy director at Just Foreign Policy, which you can find at justforeignpolicy.org. You can also follow him on Twitter at Naiman, which is Naiman. Robert, thank you so much for being on the show.
Good to be with you.
All right, so Robert, right now you are talking to us via Skype from Pakistan. So tell us, what actually brought you to Pakistan?
So I'm here with a delegation that was organized by Code Pink Women for Peace. There are about 35 of us, Americans, here in Pakistan for a week. I'm currently in Islamabad. We're here to protest the U.S. policy of drone strikes in Pakistan, particularly in the tribal areas, and to lift up, really, and try to humanize the voices of Pakistan civil society that are opposed to the drone strikes, particularly the people from the affected communities and victims' families. And the I've just arrived. I've just been here now 2 days. On October 6th, we hope to travel to Waziristan, which is where the U.S. drone strikes happen, for a rally against the drone strike. In the meantime, and the rest of the time we're here, we're having meetings with various civil society groups. And today, in fact, we had a meeting with the acting U.S. ambassador to Pakistan, Richard Hoagland.
How did that actually go? So you actually met the ambassador, and I've told you actually got to talk about some of the horrors that the drone strike program is inflicting on civilians in Pakistan. What actually went down when you met with the ambassador?
Well, we're a large group, and he opened his remarks by saying he wasn't giving a speech, that he was there to listen to what we had to say. And we took turns questioning him. I presented a petition that we circulated. It's now been signed by more than 3,000 Americans in opposition to the drone strike policy, calling for moratorium for the drone strike policy to end, and also in particular calling for the end of so-called signature strikes, where they target people that they don't even know who they're targeting, just based on an intelligence profile, and the so-called secondary or follow-up strikes, where they hit the same target again after they've hit it, which endangers people that come to assist after a strike. Civilian rescuers have been hit in these follow-up strikes. And also, it's been alleged that, in fact, drone strikes have specifically targeted civilian rescuers. So this was something highlighted by our petition. We also delivered a letter of prominent Americans with the same demands and concerns, signed by Alice Walker, Noam Chomsky, and Oliver Stone, and Danny Glover, and Naomi Wolf, Glenn Greenwald. This is all up on our website. And then I particularly stressed in my remarks to the acting ambassador directly this issue of attacks on civilian rescuers. I think it's one of the most egregious things about the current policy, and international law experts have said, as I pointed out to the acting ambassador, that regardless of whatever else one thinks about the policy, and there's this debate about international law, and many people say that this is clearly a violation of international law. But even if, as the U.S. argues, this is a lawful war conducted by the United States, even in that case, international law experts say that it's a slam dunk that the targeting of civilian rescuers is a war crime. Under international law, you're supposed to give people a chance to rescue the injured. So I challenged Ambassador Hoagland, acting Ambassador Hoagland, on this. And he responded by saying that there is no targeting of civilian rescuers. And in the time that he's been in the embassy in Pakistan, there has been no targeting of civilian rescuers. He's been in the embassy since February 2011. I then later in the meeting had an opportunity for a follow-up, and I pointed out to him that this thing that I'm talking about, this targeting, attacking of civilian rescuers, has now been documented in various places. There are two recent reports just in the last week. Living Under Drones, a report that came out from New York University Law School, Stanford Law School. There was also a report from the Campaign for Innocent Victims in Conflict and Columbia Law, both of which talked about the evidence of attacks on civilian rescuers. There was an earlier report by the Bureau of Investigative Journalism in the UK in conjunction with the British newspaper The Independent, and there was also an article about this in the New York Times. So there is a bunch of...
It is documented that this is taking place.
It is documented that this has taken place. And I also pointed out that regardless of whether one accepts that civilian rescuers have been directly targeted, the U.S. is employing a tactic, these secondary strikes, these follow-up strikes, which intrinsically puts civilian rescuers at risk, regardless of whether that's the explicit intent of U.S. policy. If you go back an hour later and hit the same target again, you are very likely to hit people that go to help, even if that wasn't your explicit intention to do so. This also has been documented. In fact, in the report Living Under Drones, the authors cited a humanitarian organization as saying, we won't go to the site of a drone strike for 6 hours after the strike because of this danger of the follow-up strike. And they cite other evidence that, based on interviews of people, survivors, people in the region, saying that people are afraid to go to the site. No one will go help after a drone strike because of the fear of a follow-up strike. So that all is documented. So I presented that to the ambassador and said, we have now these 4 different reports on this, and I urged him, go look at these reports and please put out a statement from the embassy, investigate, follow up, investigate, put out a statement from the embassy saying, we've looked at these allegations and we don't believe them to be true, or we don't believe them to be true over this period of time, and here's why. And I said, that if you do that, that would greatly increase the transparency of this debate. And he agreed that that would be a good thing. He agreed that it would increase the transparency of the debate. He did not commit to the U.S. Embassy to doing that, but he acknowledged that it would be a good thing and increase the transparency of the debate. So we're going to follow up on this. We have at least some of this exchange captured on video, and we're going to produce a transcript of it. And, this is a very rare thing in the history of this policy. Getting U.S. officials on the record on any of these specific questions is a very big deal. President Obama has spoken about it a couple times. John Brennan, the president's counterterrorism advisor, has spoken about it a couple times. But in the times they've spoken about it, they've never gotten into this level of detail about specific questions on the policy, like attacking civilian rescuers, secondary strike. They just make these general statements about, there aren't many civilian casualties. Contrary, we've heard Brennan called civilian deaths extremely rare. President Obama said, this is very narrowly focused. We're just targeting people on a list. So we actually, I think, broke some new ground today in getting a senior U.S. official on the record answering specific questions about the detail of the policy. And I hope that when we put this out into the world, other people will pick it up and we'll get some further discussion and friction on this. Again, this is just a very rare thing to have any U.S. official engaging on these specific questions.
Again, I'm talking to Robert Naiman from Just Foreign Policy, justforeignpolicy.org. We are talking via Skype. He is currently in Pakistan with a coalition trying to draw attention to the horrors of America's drone strike program. So you've only been there for a couple of days. Tell me, have you had the opportunity to speak with actual Pakistanis about the reality of living under the threat of drones?
Yes, with the proviso that we're in Islamabad. So that's like, being in Washington, D.C., and the policy that we're talking about is being carried out in West Virginia. So we're not
Right.
actually in the area where people, in Islamabad, there's no drones flying overhead. People around here, unless they're from Waziristan, which there are some people here who are actually refugees from Waziristan. So there are people in Islamabad that had this experience, but this is not daily life in Islamabad. This is one of the reasons why we want to go to Waziristan on October 6th and 7th, and there's going to be a rally, but there's also going to be a meeting with people from the area. But it is, it is also possible to talk with people here, and we did have a meeting yesterday at a think tank called Institute for Policy Studies. No relation to the similarly named organization in Washington, D.C., but it's a think tank that considers military national security policy. And there were several people at the meeting who are from Waziristan, and they talked about the impact of this policy on people in Waziristan, the bitterness and the resentment there of people feeling that they don't count. The policies of the Pakistani government and of the U.S. government are telling them that they don't count because their suffering has not been reported and it hasn't affected government policy. So we did get some taste of that, but I hope that we'll get more opportunities in the coming days to meet more people from Waziristan and hear their story.
You write about at Truth Out about the reality that the drone strike program that the United States government is using in Pakistan has in fact turned the Pakistani public against the United States. Talk about that a little bit, because a lot of people, the people who blindly support this drone strike policy, were like, oh, we're killing terrorists, it's making us safer. But in reality, it very likely it is not making us safer. And in reality, we are actually fostering the next wave of hatred against the United States. Talk about that.
So we have poll data. Groups like the Program on International Policy Attitudes and the Pew Charitable Trust polled Pakistani public opinion. The Pakistanis now say that something like 3/4 say that they perceive the United States to be an enemy. And it is widely acknowledged that a key driver of this is the drone strike policy. In fact, the Pakistani foreign minister was asked about this question of Pakistani public attitude, and she said one word: drones. So this is, something that some people at least recognize, although it hasn't entered public debate very much in the United States. There isn't much public debate, as you say. Many people say in Americans, when they talk about this at all, say that they support the policy, but what they're really supporting, I think, is not the actual policy. They don't actually know what that is. What they're supporting when they say they support it is a story that's being told about the policy that actually has very little to do with the actual policy. So, for example, people say, oh, Americans support this, and they'll cite evidence like this Washington Post poll from February, where something like 83% said, yeah, they support the policy. They strongly or somewhat support the policy. If you actually look at what was the question that the Washington Post asked, it was, do you support targeting suspected terrorist leaders with drone strike? Okay, so that's the story. So 83% support the story that's being told about the policy. But this report that came out last week, Living Under Drones, from New York University and Stanford Law, pointed out that something like according to the reports of the Bureau for Investigative Journalism, somewhere between 15 and 30% of deaths in the drone strikes since 2004 have been civilians, somewhere between 15 and 30%. And in addition, the percentage of deaths that were top-level militant leaders, that was 2%. 2%. So wow. That's not the policy that's been sold to the American people. That's not a policy that's narrowly focused on top-level terrorist leaders. 2%, that's not narrowly focused. Far more civilians have been killed in these drone strikes than top-level terrorist leaders. So that's why the statement that Americans support the drone strike is kind of meaningless and misleading. Because the thing that people say that they're supporting is something that doesn't actually exist. There does not actually exist a drone strike policy that's narrowly focused on top-level terrorist leaders. There exists a drone strike policy that's killing, at least 7 times as many civilians as it's killing top-level terrorist leaders.
Again, I'm talking to Robert Naiman from Just Foreign Policy, justforeignpolicy.org. We were talking via Skype. He is currently in Pakistan. Before I let you go, because we're almost out of time here, I'd like to discuss again some of the fear, because I think if most Americans had a taste of what these civilians are living to, just the fear of even going to a wedding, the fear of a doctor going to help people who were a victim of this, because again, doctors go to try to treat people who have been evaporated by a drone strike, and then there's another drone happens an hour later, and it ends up killing doctors and rescue workers. Talk about just the fear and horror that these people are going through, and hopefully that talking about this can break through some people who blindly support this policy in the United States. Talk about some of the day-to-day life that these civilians are going through as a result of our policies.
So this is a really important question that fortunately was really highlighted by this report from New York University Law and Stanford Law, which noted that there's this debate about civilian deaths, where the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, something like between 400 and 800 civilian deaths since 2004. U.S. officials dispute this, although they won't tell us what their numbers are. And we also know from a report in the New York Times that the U.S., the CIA, is using this definition that any military-aged male killed by a drone strike is, by definition, by fiat, is a militant. If you're a military-aged male, you're killed by a drone strike, then by definition you are a militant unless somebody proves to the U.S. government after your death that you weren't a militant. So the U.S. has redefined what civilian is, and then they come up with this apparently, we don't know the numbers, this low count. But as this report, Living Without Drones, pointed out, even putting to the side the question of civilian deaths and civilian injury, you have the whole issue of terrorizing a whole civilian population who live in constantly hear the drone strikes over the drones flying. There's this buzz they hear all the time, and so they know the drone strikes could happen at any time. At any time, you could be sitting in your house and your could be blown up. People hear them at night. People report, they have trouble sleeping. They wake up screaming in the middle of the night because of the drones. You'll have psychological problems and trauma and emotional distress just from this constant fear of the drones. And so, therefore, in judging what the civilian toll is, which is part of the cost of the policy, you have to add up not just the people killed, not just the people injured, not just the people displaced from their homes, but the cost to the whole population of living in a state of constant fear.
Exactly. Robert Naiman, he is the policy director for Just Foreign Policy. You can find it at justforeignpolicy.org. You can find him on Twitter at Naiman, Naiman. You can follow him for updates from Pakistan. Again, you should read his report on Truth Out. Robert, again, it's so important, all of you over there who are trying to draw some attention to this. The fact that you actually were able to get an answer, or a sort of an answer from the U.S. ambassador there is is gigantic. Thank you so much for going there and trying to draw attention to our horrible policy. Again, I would hope that the more Americans learn about this, the more would come out against it. So thank you so much for what you're doing, and thank you for being on the show.
Good to be with you.